Funding for this program is brought to you by Bismarck Big Boy. From pizza burgers flying style to fast and delicious fried chicken, Bismarck Big Boy has been a local legend since 1954.
There was a prominent businessman in town that would come in and buy a big box of rubber bands, and then the next day he would return them minus the 5 rubber bands he needed. So my dad would grumble and whatever. And so when we would drive into St. Mary's Cemetery, before my dad died, obviously, he'd go, "Thank God that son of a gun is dead." So he never got over that.
The Woodmansee family moved to Bismarck in 1886, 3 years before the city became North Dakota's capital. In 1914, Harry Jefferson Woodmansee opened an office supply and service business that served the community for over 100 years. From 1929 to 2018, Woodmansee's was located at 113 North 4th Street, the original home of longtime department store A.W. Lucas.
Harry and Tess were my grandparents, and his parents came to steal apparently before that, and we found out about a boarding house that they had, which would be across the street from what's the current Presbyterian church, where that motel was just torn down. There's a boarding house that was a Woodmansee boarding house we didn't know about. So Harry and Tess had 3 kids. They were Joe, Mary Jane, and Bob. And then Bob and Mary Ellen went on to have 5 kids that were very active at St. Mary's High School. And Winnie and Joe had 7 kids that were very active at Bismarck High School. And they were Bob and Mary Ellen's kids were Nancy, Jeff, Mary Mike, Susan, and Jimmy. And then Winnie and Joe's kids were Tony, Tom, Pat, Butch, Fran, Joey, Kim. My grandpa Harry would have probably been considered a workaholic, very driven, cared a lot. Our mom, Winnie Woodmansee, got called back from their honeymoon because of alleged business needs. And my Uncle Bob also was a really, really hard worker. He went on to start another offshoot business.
He was I think as my sister Fran said, a workaholic. He was in a business deal with Bob McCartney at McCartney Ford, and he was going to trade in his Chevrolet station wagons for Ford station wagons. So he drove out to Bob McCartney's office and said, "Well, what do you give me for these?" We got 9 or 10 of them, whatever they were. He said, McCartney looked out the window and said, "I'll give you whatever the amount was." He said, "Is that the best you can do?" "Yeah." "Okay, thanks." Well, he came back and said, "Well, we got a deal. Take him out there." Well, Harry went back to the store and took all the radios out of the station wagons and sent them out there. And McCartney called him up and had a few choice words and wanted to know what happened to the radios. He said, "You'll never know. You wouldn't get off your duff and go out and take a look. So that's your problem, not mine." So he was a tough businessman, but a good one. He did things his way. If you moved things around in the store, he'd come down at night and move them back. But by the time I was there full time, he was gone by that time. He had passed away. I worked part-time there when I was going to school. And then when I went off to college, I never did it again until I came back and taught school for 2 years. But my uncle went to another area, and my dad kept the store.
Uncle Bob was a very tall man with a lovely bow tie, always very put together. My dad, of course, I guess in those days, my dad did wear a suit a lot of the time. But Bob was the more serious, business-oriented guy, and my dad was more apt to tell a joke and light a Camel cigarette. And just to tell you a little about our family, Tony, who was the first child born, my father had never seen a newborn baby before. Her real name is Winifred Ann, but my dad goes, "My God, she looks like Tony Galenti," which was an ugly boxer. And she is now 84 years old, and she's still Tony to this day. Our dad, Joe Woodmansee, would not have been deemed a workaholic. He had other hobbies and activities that he preferred to pursue. There was a prominent businessman in town that would come in and buy a big box of rubber bands, and then the next day he would return them minus the 5 rubber bands he needed. So my dad would grumble and whatever, and so when we would drive into St. Mary's Cemetery before my dad died, obviously, he'd go, "Thank God that son of a gun is dead." So he never got over that. Our dad was he drank more than his share, but the other thing is he was incredibly quick-witted. He was so funny, very quick with the one-liners. So humor was a huge part of the Woodmansee family.
When I was there, the big challenge was my dad. Because my dad he was just at one of those times where you never knew what you were going to get. I got fired twice and quit once in about a 3-year period. So you can take your pick on, but as it turned out, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I went on, did some other things, and it was good. It was good. I learned a lot. He helped me a lot. I mean, I was in the process of, I'll do what I have to do. But I mean, he knew what he was doing in the business. Don't get me wrong. And he was good at it. It's just that he didn't spend much time at it. He was more interested in having fun, and which he did. So it was well after that he finally quit, and things went on, and John and Joey ran it very well for, 20 years or whatever it was.
Throughout that time, many of our family worked at Woodmansee's. Tony did Christmas cards. Tom worked there for a number of years. Pat did stamp Christmas cards. Then Joey went on to be a partner with my husband, John, in the business. And they were very supportive of all of Bismarck athletics. In those days, people came in and knocked for support for the High Herald newspaper and for this tournament and that tournament. So that was one change that I noticed, that old Bismarck always supported everything locally. And when the big corporations came in, they would just go, "Oh, so sorry, can't help you out."
Help tell the stories of Bismarck's past and become a financial sponsor of this program. Contact info@bismarckhistory.org to learn more.
When I came in, Joey had just gotten out of college, and so he'd probably been there a couple of years, and he invited me to join the store. And he was the guy that kind of really took charge. He was the president. He and I together purchased Woodmansee's and the building from Joe and Winnie. And I forget exactly how long that took. It was probably a decade. So Joe was still involved in the store for probably 10 years or so after we'd been there. But Joey really, he cared about business. He really worked hard. He stayed on top of things, and he's the one that really kept it going while we were there. He changed with the times, and he was essential to keeping Woodmansee's alive for the last 30 or 40 years that we were there. It was a big operation, 40, 50, 60 employees, I think, covering the state. And then as the competition, every other community realized that, well, Minot would have someone then, or Grand Forks or Fargo, wherever they were going to sell this stuff, would provide somebody to compete with them. So that slowly dwindled down to less and less all the time. And from a big service department with, I think maybe they had a dozen people fixing typewriters, adding machines at the time, that kind of thing. I remember we had a big section of ledger sheets, typewriters, even manual typewriters, because the oil boom was in process and all these guys were going out to the county courthouses and they need manual typewriters to type this stuff up. Carbon paper, all this stuff. Didn't sell a lot of furniture at the time when we first started. Had, I suppose, 15 employees, outside salesmen. I think one of the more interesting things during my time there was that we had a retail front, but as the box stores came into Bismarck and the internet developed, soon 98% of our business would go out the back door, meaning salesmen were calling on accounts and people would call in and we'd sell merchandise that way. Evolved somewhat into a little bit more furniture sales probably over the years, but I think the big thing was it was a retail front as it was downtown's shopping malls kind of thing into we could just well been out in a steel building someplace because retail was not part of downtown as it changed over the years. Customer service still is really, really huge. You know, if you get a bunch of good people working for you, which we had over the years, and very dedicated employees, they were family. They were there for, a decade, 20, 30 years. I think Dan Bailey, maybe 40 years, I'm not sure. But these guys were dedicated. And so they became friends not only with us at Woodmansee's, but with the people that they would call on and the customers that they would take care of. So that's about the only way you can do it because we learned how to compete price-wise. And the way you change inventory, that kind of thing, all that would have to change. But, just ordering online, just like you do from Home Office Depot, I guess you could order from us online when we were done. So I just really enjoyed working with people. I enjoyed visiting with them, getting their concepts of how we could change the way they were working and the stuff that they were working on and we'd work together to make it better from them. Very relaxed. I never shoved anything down anybody's throat. I think that's kind of what the Woodmansee's crew did. We were there to support, we weren't overly professional, didn't hound you to buy product. We just tried to provide and take care of our customers, I think.
What they prided themselves on was service, but also the back room was quite entertaining.
Well, we had it was like an in-service in the back room every morning, which was kind of frustrating because back in the day, not an in-service, a coffee shop. And an awful lot of the downtown local businessmen, most of them being former athletes, would come in and they would hang around and smoke and drink coffee for 3 or 4 hours. And it was legitimately just a massive gossip fest. Very frustrating to work through if you were the delivery guy in the back trying to get out the door with these guys hanging around. But there'd be days there'd be a dozen guys in there for hours visiting. And it was always a very low-key, relaxed atmosphere. Everybody was buddies, and it wasn't the stress wasn't there. So that was a really nice time. And all these people were very nice and fun to be around and fun to work with. So that was a great time.
It was always a packed house and entertaining. You would frequently hear a lot of laughter coming out of that back room. My dad, Joe Woodmansee, I don't think my Uncle Bob stopped there very long. He would be more on a mission coming in or out.
It was a big enough business at one time, yet still small enough to take care of the employees. Most of the employees that were there, even when I was there, were longtime employees. We were lucky that way. Even my dad had employees that, unless somebody got real sick or died, they were there. They were pretty loyal to their employees. And I think I learned that from them. Treat people the way you want to be treated, and they did that. But yeah, the employees were good.
Winnie Woodmansee was amazing. In 1979, she was selected as North Dakota Mother of the Year, and she stayed at home mostly with 7 of us that were going this way and that way between baseball and football and cheerleading, and all the girls in both the Joe and Winnie Woodmansee family and Bob and Mary Ellen family were all lifeguards. So she was taking lunch to Hillside or Elks Pool for somebody along the way. And she was just phenomenal. She was always the regular piece, and she would work on every bond issue in schools. And she had a breakfast club that consisted of Mrs. Simley, that the school's named after Jean Pierce. And so she found out quite a bit of what was going on in Bismarck. She would indicate that a little bird had told her that Tom had disappeared from school that Monday morning and still thought he should play in the game that night. Education was really, really important to my mother. My dad, not so much. He went to UND for a year, and then his father, Harry, thought it would be best if he came home. But my mom didn't get a chance to go to college, so it was the rule at our house you had to graduate from college before you could get married. And so she was ever so proud that all 7 of us have college degrees. My mother was pretty sensitive about being a serious Demons fan. So St. Mary's got bigger headlines in the Tribune. she might write a letter to the editor about the coverage not being equally fair. Dan Schmeeker, the football coach, gave she and my parents a lifelong pass. So at the end, when my dad wasn't walking very well, they would drive in at the bowl and sit at the end to watch football games. And then after my dad passed away, my mother would go to football games all by herself at the bowl, and we'd be freezing and leave at halftime, and she'd be sitting there in her Air Force parka and her sleeping bag and just looking at us like, "You wimps, what do you mean you're leaving?" She didn't miss a game, and she had her own special spot at the Civic Center too. And Tom and Scott both were announcers throughout the years, primarily for basketball. And Mom was really proud of all of the athletic endeavors of the whole family. All of us on both sides were very athletic. There was football players. Oh, and my brother Butch, I have to mention because I came after him. He was a football player. He was a basketball player. He was a star pitcher. He went to the Air Force Academy, and he got straight A's. So I would walk into a classroom, and a teacher would go, "Oh," and I'd go, "Yeah, we just share the same last name. That's it."
Yeah, I would say very much athletic. The girls too. They did their thing, and my brothers and I did ours. But my dad is, it's no secret he had an alcohol problem, and which is it wasn't a secret around town by any means. And he probably got kicked out as many games as he got to watch. But that's just one of those things. But they were big fans. But sometimes my mother was by far and away the best. She was there. They'd sit away from each other because Joe would always get thrown out of the ball game. I was fortunate enough. I played Legion ball. I played high school baseball. I played junior college, and then I was able to play at Wyoming for 2 years, and got to play against some pretty good athletes. Reggie Jackson, Sal Bando. Didn't play for long against them, but we got to play against them. I've still got a record down there at Wyoming. I got 2 losses in 1/3 of an inning, and that's almost impossible to do, but I did it. So, yeah, it was a great experience for me. I got to play against some of the best guys around and learned a lot, and humbles you quite a bit to go from pitching against Minot State to Arizona State. It's a little wake-up call, but it was good. It was good. I learned a lot, and then once I got back here, continued to play basketball and softball that's why I have trouble walking today. So, but yeah, I had a lot of fun.
It was never a dull moment at our house. Most of us, my mom, Winnie, was very welcoming to everyone. Our house was like the YMCA before we had a YMCA. I still have some resentment because Neil Callbear, who I'll send him wherever he is, he and my brother were pitchers. So my mother would make them steaks before a baseball game. The rest of us didn't get steaks, so we'd hang over the back of the chair and wait to try to chew on the bones. But so she took care of everybody was welcome, but she particularly was fond of athletes. And at baseball games, she would keep score. Bill Sorensen remembers coming to sit by her once under the bleachers, and she said, "Be quiet. I'm waiting to see if this guy gets on first base." She was very attentive to the game. And she was equal opportunity. I mean, she would support other friends' kids that were playing. Michael Gilchrist played at St. Mary's, and she didn't miss one of his games. And she went to girls' basketball games. She was just a really super fan. She was an amazing woman. The Woodmansees had 18 grandkids and then a multitude of great grandkids. Everybody has gone forth and multiplied. And still to this day, athletics. Several of our kids were very active, also playing basketball, soccer, hockey, and academics are so important throughout. And now there's great grandkids that it keeps going. It's also very valued. We came from some pretty great stock, and we keep giving no matter where we are or where we live.
Help tell the stories of Bismarck's past and become a financial sponsor of this program. Contact info@bismarckhistory.org to learn more.